All right, tip number 19, and this is kind of a continuation of tip number 18. So we started to talk about pay plans in tip number 18. We didn't want to take too long, so we're going to carry on in tip number 19, and we're going to kind of finish the pay plan discussion. So there's some rules around pay plans. So rules. It has to balance my margins. I know that there are some consultants right now that are talking about gross profit dollars per hour, and they're saying don't worry about margin. But frankly, margin matters a ton, because if I don't have margin, then I have to do a whole lot more work in order to get enough gross profit dollars per hour. We do pay our bills with gross profit dollars, but we get gross profit dollars with margin. So I've got to balance margins. I want to make sure that I pay correctly, and that I don't end up, if the tech is not productive, or if the tech is really productive, I don't end up either punishing the business or punishing the tech. And I want to hold my margins throughout. Number two, they have to manage people. So a good pay plan will help manage the employee, because as the employee performs, they get more pay. It will motivate them, which is number three. And as they do less work, the pay will actually drop, which kind of is a penalty. So it creates a penalty and a motivation that helps to manage the employee and get the employee to do what's right. And if we're paying attention to our numbers as managers, we're certainly going to help the employee. Now, another rule is that it has to reward for the right things. And unfortunately, some pay plans don't reward for the right things. And I would tell you hourly would be one of those pay plans, because it doesn't matter if I produce or not, if at least as I meet some minimum standard. I've been in shops where the employee is putting out 24 hours a week, and they're still paying them, you know, $32 an hour for 40 hours, and their margins are diminishing, and they're actually losing money on labor. So the reward in a flat rate pay plan, or excuse me, in an hourly pay plan, is not for performance. In an hourly pay plan, it's just what's the reward? There really isn't one. If anything, they get rewarded for the wrong stuff in an hourly pay plan. I think you want to be careful too that you reward for the right things, in the sense of a technician has no control over margin, really. So you can't hold a technician accountable for something that they don't have control over. So the pay plan should not punish or reward for something that there's no control. Such as in the case of a technician, margin. So if the service advisor decides to reduce the price of the job, cut the parts, or cut the labor on the job, the technician has no control over that, and hence could be punished for the wrong things or rewarded for the wrong things, because the service advisor is the one in control of that. And then last but not least, I would put it up here with margin, the business and the employee got to win. In other words, the employee needs to get paid well, they need to have a good benefit package, and they need to have a nice place to work, the tools, the education, etc. And the business has to hold margin. So now let's talk about some of the mistakes when we're building pay plans. We'll clean this up, and now we'll talk about mistakes, and then we're going to build a couple of pay plans, and we're going to be on our way. I think one of the biggest mistakes in a pay plan is believing I don't need a bonus. My father was that guy that basically said, the employee gets paid, they should be happy with their paycheck, they don't need bonuses. I think that's a big mistake. I think a pay plan that rewards for the wrong things is a mistake. I don't want a pay plan that rewards my employees for doing the wrong things. I cannot abdicate management. And let me explain that. If my technician is not productive, and therefore my technician and or my service advisor are punished for that loss of production, and it is not their fault, and I don't manage it or I don't fix the things in my company that create productivity, such as how we price our jobs, how we schedule, how we dispatch, how long it takes to turn a work order from the technician's estimate to a sale, for the service advisor to do their job, get it back to the technician, how long it takes to get the parts, whether or not we get the right parts. If I don't solve those problems, then the employee is punished for that. Then this is a problem, and whatever I do, that's a mistake within my pay system. So advocating management, allowing them things to just happen in my business is a big mistake. Another mistake is not having an effective and accurate measurement. If I'm going to pay an employee based on productivity, then I have to have an effective and accurate way to measure productivity such that the employee believes it, I know it's true. And if I'm going to try to hold margins in my pay plan, I also have an effective way to manage, an accurate way to manage my margins. And I need to be looking at those things routinely, and we're going to talk about in some of the next tips that we bring forward. If the bonus is too small, if I have a reward for my technician if they produce more than 100% of $1 an hour or 40 bucks a week, to me that's kind of like, who cares? Bonuses have to be big enough to be able to change behavior. So in our performance-based pay plans, we would talk about a thing called the 60-40 rule. And the 60-40 rule basically says that about 60% of the pay comes as a base, and 40% comes as a reward, and specifically for doing the employee doing what I want. So in the case of a technician, what do I want from a tech? I want productivity. I want education. I want certification. I would put in accuracy, but what I really want is a little or few comebacks. And if I could measure attitude, I would want a good attitude. Although attitude is hard to measure, and you don't really want to put stuff in the pay plan that you can't measure effectively. We'll go through a service advisor in a moment. So there's one more mistake, and that's having a bonus that's a urban legend. No urban legends. And an urban legend is something that you've heard about, but it's rarely seen or never really seen. So in some shops, we have these bonus plans that are just not reachable, and the employees never get them. So one of the secrets to creating a good pay plan, performance enhanced pay plan, is to start your bonuses really at about 80% productivity, but they're very small at that level, and the bonuses get bigger and bigger as the employee performs more and more of the tasks that you want them to do, because as they perform more and more of the tasks that you want them to do, the business makes more and more money, and therefore I can afford to share more and more money. All right, now, so we know what we want for a technician, so we would build a technician pay plan based on that 60-40 rule, and if I had $32 an hour to pay a technician I would probably start them somewhere around 22. And by the way, in most states today, this is probably too low to start. Certainly if you're in California, LA, San Francisco, New York. So I need a much higher labor rate so I can pay higher. I would tell you good technicians today are probably making $40 to $50 an hour. And so starting somebody at 22 is probably too low, but we're going to use this as an example. It's just an easy and simple example. So this is a base pay an hour on the clock, and now we're going to pay everything else that we're going to pay the technician. We're going to pay based on performance or productivity, on what they're doing for us. So if my tech does 35 hours in a week, this is weekly, then we're going to give them another $1 an hour. If my tech does 40 hours, we're going to give them another $2 an hour. If my tech does 45 hours, we're going to give them another $2 an hour. And now we start about education. If they get 8 hours of education in the previous quarter, then they might get another $2 an hour. And then if they had their ASE master, they might get themselves $1 an hour or $2. If they had their L1, we might give them another $1. If they've been in my company for 3 years, they might get another $1 an hour. If they've been with me for 5 years, they might get another $1 an hour. And if they had less than, and I got to do it this way, the less than, say, 2% comeback rate, then I got to give them another $1 an hour or something like that. And all of this is paid based on production. So they get their clock no matter what, $880, and then they have a chance to earn 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now that's more than 32. That takes me to 34. So I need to move my labor rate up from 104 to 110. When we get over 45 hours of production, when we move over 40, we're actually earning more money because we're not paying this $22 an hour on the clock anymore, and the shop is earning more money, and I'm able to pay this extra $2 an hour at 45, and it doesn't affect me. It still holds margin all the way through. So a technician that did 22 hours, did a 40-hour clock, and did 50 hours in production, could make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. $12 an hour times 50. That's $600 plus their $880 base pay, and they could have made $1,480 that week because they were productive. Now, they're still going to get their $880 no matter what happens, but if their production is less and they did 34 hours, let's say 30 hours of production, then the $600 is going to change because they're going to lose these $5 an hour even if they have the rest. So now instead of 12, we're going to do 7 times 30, and 7 times 30 is $210. And unfortunately, instead of making $1,500, they're now making $1,090, and that additional 400 and whatever it is, or $1,700 a month, is almost it's almost a house payment, or it could be a house payment in some parts of the country. It certainly is I got the biggest toolbox and the biggest truck. So that's a substantial motivator. So we would want to use that as a motivator. Now let's do one for a service advisor. what we would look at is we would look at what our business is producing, and then we would take 10% of that and say that's how I can pay my sales staff. If I have a business that's doing $1 million, 1 mil, and I have only one service advisor, I have $100,000 to pay the service advisor. Loaded, of course, remember that has to be a loaded cost, so we would take about 25% off of that, and which means I have about $75,000 to pay the service advisor as a real pay. So where we might start is by paying this service advisor $800 a week as a base. Because that would get us at close to 42,000. That would leave us another 33,000 to pay for a bonus, and then we have to think to ourselves, what do we want from a service advisor? And for me, that's sales. They need to sell a certain amount, got to sell $1 million so that I have this money to pay them. It's margin. Doesn't matter how much you sell. If you don't hold margin, there's no profits to pay you. So margin is super important. And then we also want customer satisfaction. I call that CSI. And we could say that we want, whatever that is, 82,000, 90,000 a month in sales. We want to see a margin of 62%. We're going to put it at 60%. And we want a CSI of 97%, and we build that into their pay plan. So now they have a base, and then weekly, this is weekly, and then if they sell between, let's see, 90K a month, if I divide that, it's under 25,000, but let's say that if they sold 0 to 16,000 in the business in a week, then there's no bonus. If they sell 16K to, 18,000, there's a small bonus. If they sell 18K to 24K, then there's a bigger bonus. And if they sell above 24K, there's another bonus. Because remember, as they're selling this additional work, we're actually bringing additional profit dollars in and additional money. And so we can afford to pay them more. And by the way, if they sell more than 24,000 a month, then we actually have a business going to do $1.2 million instead of $1 million. And then I have another $20,000 approximately to pay in this pay plan for this single service advisor. So really, somewhere in here at about 21,000, 22,000, we're at a point where we can't afford to pay more. But as we do more than that, then we can afford to pay more. So this would be a weekly bonus. This whole bonus would be weekly, and then we would create a monthly bonus on top of that. So if they sold 0 to 75,000 that month, or we could do an average week, but to 75,000 that month, they get a $300 bonus for the whole month. If they sold 75K to 110, they could get another, let's say that's $400. And by the way, I would go back and do the math and make sure all the margins match exactly. But and then anything, if they sold over 110, again, remember, if we're selling over 110,000, now we're actually doing $1.3 million. So I have extra money to pay, and so if they did more than $110,000, then I'm going to pay out 1% of sales, which could be a substantial bonus, another $1,000, $1,200. So they could have a monthly bonus in the $1,900, $2,000 range. They could have a weekly bonus in the $700 range, and they still have their base pay of $800, and this still holds margins. Now, remember I said there's more important to me than just sales. Margins and CSI are important to me. So what I normally do is I create a penalty for service advisors. I have all this on some really interesting spreadsheets here at the Institute. We can bonus for darn near anything we want. We built these interesting spreadsheets that create the pay plan and lay it all out, and make sure it holds margins, do all the hard work for us. So I create a penalty for the service advisor if my gross margin, is below. Let's see. I think I have to do it that way. Is below, I don't know, 60%. Remember, we had 60% as our goal. Then they could lose 40% of their monthly bonus. And if my CSI, and if I did that wrong, you can send me an email or send me a text or say, hey, Cecil, you messed that up. I think that's correct. If my CSI is below 98%, then they could lose another 20% of their monthly bonus. Whatever I do and whatever is important to me in my business is how I build the pay plan. So as I said, we have these interesting spreadsheets that are pay plans where we can put in one or more bonus levels for the service advisor and still make sure that everything holds margin. Now in this particular pay plan, because of the way I built it, and I'd have to do the math exactly, but my bet is this is going to hold the margin that I want it to hold, and we will not be paying out more than 10% with the load when we do sales. As we do lower sales, the service advisor gets less money. As we do more sales and we hold our margins higher and we have higher customer sat, then the service advisor would get more money. Now, when you build these performance enhanced pay plans and you put them in place, what we've seen is anywhere from about a 14% increase in productivity to about a 40% increase in productivity, and we've seen sales increase dramatically because now there's a motivation for the employee to do what we want them to do. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you are enjoying the tips. If you are, please let us know. You can do it at Cecil@i4abe.com. That's I-F-O-R-A-B-E.com. Thank you.